Damien, hi. Great to see you. Thank you for appearing on the kind of Piscari Insights series. And you've got some amazing insights into things that were quite shocking, I found, which was brilliant.
Honoured to be part of it. I'm looking forward to it.
So thank you, Damien, for joining us. So before we start on the questions, just a bit of background on you and kind of what you do now.
Yeah, so I studied psychology. I'm fascinated by the human mind. I went from there into advertising, worked at big agencies, set up my own agency, multi-award-winning creative hot shop, sold that, and took a boat through the French canals for a year, went to Spain, wrote a book about the adventure, and ended up as a brand consultant for people like Honda and Microsoft, Universal Records. I then did a lot of work with book publishers. I worked with JK Rowling, Stephen King, Lee Child, Jodi Picoult. I developed a #1 gaming app, which was highly praised by Apple, won lots of awards. And then I co-founded a business which is The Economist magazine meets TED Talks. So it's basically a financial video channel where the leading experts in finance talk about what they think is happening to the world in that respect, and that's called Real Vision, and we are 6 years old.
Very good, brilliant. I mean, amazing. I mean, to meet someone that's worked with some of those authors as well, from a commercial perspective, must have been fascinating to bring that creative world together with the commercial world,
Yes,
and some of that tension, I imagine.
Yeah, it's extraordinary actually, because the process of writing a book is very different to the process of launching it and marketing it and establishing it. So it's a very interesting collision, as you say, of creativity and commercialism.
I mean, just out of interest, we didn't prep this question, but I'd just be fascinated, I'm sure everyone else would, was how does that work? How do you, because I'd imagine the chemistry part is so critical with a creative person.
It's actually really interesting because most authors, if you think about it, an author works in a shed or in a room on their own, locked away, creating a world or multiple worlds. It's a very long and very solitary process.
Yes.
And very often at the end of it, they've no idea how that book will be perceived. So they go from 1, 2, 3, 5 years writing to suddenly being thrust into the limelight and having this thing that they've agonized over, in front of the whole world. And my role was in the middle of that to try to work out the best way to position a novel or a series so that people would come at it in the most positive way and talk about it and share it. And very interesting, not as easy as it might sound.
Absolutely not. I think what we might do is we might have a separate, if you're willing and you've got time, a separate recording just on that. I think would be fascinating.
Absolutely, no problem.
Really fascinating. So great, we'll come back to that. Excellent. So we've got kind of 3 questions that we talked about. So which I love the first one. So the kind of, when we spoke before, one of the comments you made was websites will die, channels are the future.
Yes.
It's a really bold statement. So could you provide some more context around that and what the implications are?
So, if you're as old as I am, you can remember a time. You can remember a time when the world moved from printed brochures to websites.
Yes.
And it was an unusual period, and lots of people were doing both for a long time. And then people were doing Flash players, and there were all different kinds of websites, but it was an elongated transition period, and it was very tough for people to understand that the world had changed, the world was going digital, and the way we consumed information was changing dramatically.
Yes.
Now that transformation happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, it did.
20 years ago, we were moving on to websites, and now everybody has a website. Then, around 10 years ago, everybody realised that the world was moving again, and they had to get into social media. So suddenly there was a kind of a stampede towards a presence on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it might be. And even that is evolving now as different audiences, different nuances in your brand are better expressed or audiences are reached on Instagram versus Facebook or
LinkedIn
TikTok,
or whatever. Yeah.
Or LinkedIn or whatever it might be. Well, there is another shift that is happening now, which is a transition towards video. And if you look at the way we use social media, what happens is video content is liked and shared 10, 20, 100 times more than written content or photographic imagery.
Wow.
So as a result of that, and we see it on our personal feeds, but increasingly you'll see videos popping up from brands as well on your social feeds, and that is happening more and more and more. The transition to video, the extraordinary rise of TikTok, which is entirely video driven, it is more kind of fuel to the fire for this. So what is happening is brands.
And by the way, Damien, do you think it's B2B and B2C? Just out of interest.
Totally. And
Okay.
I even think that the concept of B2B and B2C is slightly changing as well. I think that it's bizarre to think that a B2B audience, that somehow those people are weirdly different in a B2B environment than a B2C environment. Lots of the triggers, the emotional triggers, the psychological levers, the intellectual arguments are exactly the same for both audiences. If I work at a bank, it doesn't mean that when I go home I'm a completely different person. I'm still the same person.
No,
there's some nuances in what I'm interested in and how you talk to me, but a lot of the things that I'm interested in are exactly the same. And video
the psychology is the same, isn't it? I think Cialdini, all those years ago when he wrote his book on influence, the principles apply whether you're in business or at home. Yeah,
totally. And I think video applies to both. And so I think what's going to happen is, at the moment we're in that transition period where people had brochures and they had a website. I think right now we're in a transition period where what people are doing is they are creating websites that have video on them, and that's the transition period. What's going to happen is increasingly people are just going to go all in on video, and what will happen is, I think, over the next 5 years, is people will start creating a video channel. So rather than just having a static website that is maybe updated every 6 months, or maybe you drop the odd video on it, people are going to move increasingly towards their web presence is a video channel where they are talking to their audience on an ongoing basis. They're updating content with videos. Many of them will be filmed on iPhones and Androids, where they're just grabbing a phone and saying, right, look, let me tell you what's happening today. There'll be updates on a daily basis. We'll be much more agile in the way we communicate. And I can foresee a time where not only do brands have a video channel, so Nike could have an amazing video channel.
Yes,
some of the sports they cover, some of their celebrities. You can imagine that would be an extraordinary channel. So I think there'll be a period where there are different brand channels, and then I can see brands coming together, and a Nike coming together with a yoga well-being brand, and coming together with another brand, saying, look, why don't we all come together and we'll create a lifestyle around the values that all of our brands feel are important to us. And in this weird way, you'll end up with lifestyle channels just like we used to have on television.
On TV, absolutely. Exactly. And what about user-generated content? How does user-generated content apply?
Oh my God, I think it is so important. The days where brands could pontificate and deliver a monologue and literally broadcast to people, has completely gone. You have to be in a dialogue now. It has to be iterative. Your audience have a voice, and they will use it for you or against you, so you might as well be part of the conversation with them. And user-generated content will be a fundamental part of this process. So if I was Nike creating a video channel that was the Nike video channel, I wouldn't just have my sports people on there. I would have people playing in their gardens, people running around the parks. That would all be part of the narrative.
Interesting. And around that, how do you... in the old days, how do you moderate that content? So how do you stop kind of publications from users that are inappropriate against brand purpose or brand value, but the volume could be, I mean, for Nike, the volume could be colossal.
Yes. I think this is one of the hardest things for us to navigate, brand owners and marketers to navigate as we go forward, which is we are in a world of dialogue. So how do you ensure that dialogue doesn't work against you? So what a lot of brands do is they think, exactly as you just said, they think, right, well, we need to screen it, we need to filter it, we need to...
is it on message?
Is it on message? All of those things. I think what you can do is you can set some parameters for how you want the conversation to happen. So on our brand, we say, look, you can criticize the argument, you can't criticize the person. So you can set some rules.
Great.
You can't be offensive. You can argue hard, but you can't be offensive. Blah blah blah. It's naive, I think, of brands to think that they can have a dialogue with people, but then control the dialogue. You have to trust.
Exactly.
You have to trust the audience to self-regulate to a degree. You can put in some guidelines and parameters, but every now and again it will go off track. Every now and again they will criticize you or your product or your brand or your service, and either the rest of the community will come together and say, hang on a minute, I don't think that's appropriate, or you've forgotten about this, and it will self-regulate, or they have a point. And if they've got a point, then the best thing
you should listen
is listen to it and respond to it, not try to shut it down. And I think that way of engaging with an audience is still relatively new for brands. It's still very hard to put yourself in a situation where you can be openly and publicly criticized. But let's face it, if you don't do it in your own platform, they'll just go on another platform and do it there. So
they'll go somewhere else. Exactly. Right.
And all you're doing is you're suddenly the enemy, as opposed to working with them to create the solution.
So we didn't really kind of like talk about this before today, but I'd just be fascinated, given your background.
Sure.
How does storytelling and video and user-generated content come together with the brand? Because everyone's now talking about it's about story, and that sounds great, but am I a great storyteller? I can tell a story, but
sure.
there are millions of people out there trying to tell stories.
Yes.
How's that going to work?
Well, to me, it's a little bit like telling a joke. Anyone can tell
Which
a
I'm
joke.
awful at, by the way. I'm dreadful. Ask my son. I'm dreadful at. Yes.
Well, some people can tell a joke and it's funny. They've got a way of delivering it that just works. And I think it's a little bit the same with stories. Everyone's got a story, but some people can tell it well. And part of that is about timing. Part of that is about your delivery in terms of your warmth, your personality, your energy, all those factors. Part of it is also about structure and understanding narrative structure and what are the components that make for a story. And what's most extraordinary about that is that structure was defined back in the time of Socrates, back to the Greeks, where they explored what is the classic narrative structure, what works, and that is that kind of 3-part structure, that 3-act structure is still very much the classic storytelling narrative that we see, whether it's on a movie or a TV show or a joke or a conversation telling a story. We still work to that same structure. And
so what is that structure, Damien? Just remind people, what is that structure?
So basically we have the world as it was, and there is a hero in that world. The hero can be good or bad, the lead character. So there's something, you might be that person. So this is what was happening. So Robinson Crusoe was on a boat going along, and then there is a catalytic incident. Something happens that changes that world. And this is usually the beginning of the story. I was going along my boat, and then suddenly I was shipwrecked on an island. So the incident, the change, is that. So now I'm on an island. That's the first act over. The second act is usually a struggle or a quest or a mission. I'm trying to defeat Voldemort, or I'm trying to get this woman to fall in love with me, or I'm trying to get off this island. So that is the middle part of the middle act, and it's that struggle, that quest. And in that quest, you will have enemies and you will have friends, and they're an important part of that narrative. Those your friends might be the weather. It could be a physical person. Your enemy could be an evil spirit, or it could be a dark knight. Yeah. That leads up to a kind of a denouement, a big moment of climax where there is the big battle. Now, the battle might be, can I get off the island? It's not literally a physical battle. It could be, I'm battling against the sea or the elements. And that leads into the third part, which is the resolution. I'm in the new world, and things have adjusted slightly, things have changed slightly. You rarely go back to normal. You can live happily ever after, or you are a changed person because of your experience. And then you're ready for the next, literally the next installment of the journey. Now, that's a very structured way of describing it, but actually we naturally do it because it's all we've heard all our lives, from children's stories through to TV shows.
And Damien, what's the role of the guide, the mentor in the story? How does that play? Like in the Star Wars kind of series.
So there are different characters within a narrative, and again, they say there are only 6 or 7 narratives and only 6 or 7 key characters. But one of the important characters that often pops up is as you say, the guide or the wizard or the mentor. Yes. And it might be Merlin, it might be Dumbledore,
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Exactly. There are lots of them. Very often they are older and wiser or magical, but sometimes they're just a friend. But the idea is that what they do is, from a narrative perspective, they just add a different perspective, just a different way of looking at the world, which stops you, being tunneled down your trajectory, and it just makes you or enables you to look at things slightly differently, and that adds another layer to the story.
Damien, that's the best description that I've ever heard, the most succinct description of the kind of the story arc and how it works. So I thought that was brilliant.
Well, do you know what's really interesting is when you start to apply it, when you start to think about it in an applied and active way, as opposed to just delivering it naturally, and it helps you to write copy better, to make videos better, to describe your business better. The only thing that's slightly different nowadays is, in our short attention span economy, you tend to, in order to suck people into the narrative, you can't do what used to happen in the old days, which is where you'd slowly build up. You'd spend ages. The exposition was very slow. Nowadays, you tend to need to start bang with something immediate, something very dramatic, and then
you tell the story.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is why we see on Netflix and on some of the TV series, the series actually starts, the first episode, with some cataclysmic event.
Correct.
And you're shocked. And then you're into, well, how did that happen? And then they unwind the story.
Yes, it happens very often. You also see it on YouTube videos, you see it on TikTok videos, where people bang get your attention, rewind a bit, and then take you into it. Or they just take an extract that might not make sense to you, but you understand something dramatic happened.
Yeah.
And then you go back into the story to build up to it.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm conscious of your time. Very conscious of your time. We could talk for hours about this. I love it. But there was something also that you mentioned as a kind of closing question. You've got very strong opinions on the potentially destructive nature of the kind of pervasive algorithmic marketing and the impact on serendipity, creativity, and choice.
Yes. So
I thought that was really interesting. What are your thoughts?
It's very important to me, this, and it's a bit like, I remember talking about fake news a long time ago, and people say, well, what is fake news? And I remember talking about the importance of data privacy, and people kind of half get it, and I don't think they still really understand the awfulness of the way data is used now and the way we are tracked. That's starting to come to fruition. There was that fabulous documentary last year that a lot of people watched.
That's brilliant.
So there is awareness of that is coming. The next thing that I think we need to get our heads around, and we're a long way off it. Again, I think we're probably 5 years for public consciousness to kind of fully embrace it. Is At the moment, we're in love with algorithms. We think it's incredible that we go on Netflix, we watch a crime drama, and Netflix says, hey, you're going to like this and you're going to love that. And they're all crime dramas. And we just think, this is just brilliant.
Amazing.
I'm not wasting my time. I'm straight in. And on Google, it knows how I think. So it finds the things when I'm searching for Israel, the pop-up might be the history of Israel, because that's what I tend to do. And you might get holidays to Israel, because that might be
exactly.
So the same searches are yielding different results based on our history and that's the algorithm working, whether it's on YouTube or whatever. We're all still in love with it. We all think it's great, and most businesses are looking to integrate. If you like that, you'll like this kind of model. I think it's very bad for society, because what we are doing is we are closing our worlds down as individuals. And when I was a kid growing up, just go back to the kind of Netflix example, I would be sat there and we had 3 channels, and very often it felt like there was nothing I wanted to watch. And my mum would say, well, we're going to watch this about dolphins. So you end up watching a documentary about dolphins you have no interest in watching, but there is nothing else to do because you're a bored 11-year-old. And lo and behold, you are gripped by it. And that set you off on becoming a marine biologist because of the gloriousness of chance and serendipity and being exposed to things that we didn't know we liked or wanted. And I think, again, with birthday presents, I hate people who send vouchers or money. I'd rather, even if it's a failure as a present, send something that I wasn't quite expecting this, but do you know what?
Yeah.
It's going to point me in a different direction in life. Jennifer Ennis was taken to, I think she grew up in Sheffield, and I'm pretty sure this story is true. Her grandparents had her for the weekend, and they took her to some open sports day event, just as something to do. And she started doing sports, and at the end of the day, she had a great time, but one of the coaches came over and said, wow, she's got real ability. She could really go on and do something in the athletics space. And they had no idea. But because they were almost forced into a situation of doing something, they ended up discovering something about themselves. And I think one of the problems with the algorithm is as I said, it's closing down our world, it's closing down our opportunities and our imaginations, and that has to be bad for society.
And I think also, it really resonated with me. It really made me think. And the issue regarding diversity and inclusion in a very meaningful way of, the danger with the algorithm is it keeps on sending me the same sort of people that I am, because like attracts like. And then you end up with, a bunch of, me, white middle-aged males talking to white middle-aged males. And that's bad. That's
very
just bad.
And it's very bad for politics. So if you look at Brexit, or if you look at the extremism in the American elections, a lot of that comes from the normalization of extreme views. Because all we're seeing are other people who agree with us and pushing it slightly so we become more confident in that view, which is all at some level good, but there is a downside to it, which is that extremism is allowed to flourish in an environment where algorithms keep feeding and reinforcing the same perspectives and don't give you another point of view.
Which we used to call confirmation bias.
Absolutely right, yes. And now we just call it those wonderful algorithms that don't waste our time.
Absolutely. So, Damien, honestly, thank you for your time. It's been amazing. Any kind of last words for my audience of kind of like entrepreneurs, agencies, brand owners?
For me, one of the things, and it's about psychology, I always come back to that, which is our brain uses about 5% of our body weight. It uses about 20% of our energy. So we can't physically sustain ourselves to be always thinking. We literally can't sustain our brain to be thinking. So we have System A and System B thinking. System A thinking is basically habit, routine. I get the same paper, I buy the same coffee, I go to the same shops, I walk the same way to school every day or work today, or whatever it might be. System B is when we actively think. We actively put our minds to work in a fresh way. We use System A thinking about 98% of the time. So 98% of the time, we just do the same kind of thing. Yes, we might have a new email to write, but we probably write it in the same way that we write all the others. We probably use the same sign-off. We probably say the same kinds of things. If I'm asked to, in marketing, and I'm asked to write a description of my product, I probably do pretty much what I did last time, maybe tweak a few words, maybe refresh it a little bit. Very, very infrequently do we sit down and think, okay, let me think about this fresh. Let me completely disrupt the whole process, my own thought dynamics and everybody else's. And it is only by doing that that you make true step changes. And very often what a business or a person tries to do is make slight tweaks rather than step change thinking. You know, the Fosbury flop, you know, the back...
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Is a brilliant example of System B thinking where somebody just thought, do you know what? Rather than continually doing what everyone else is doing but trying to be a bit stronger, a bit better, there might be a different way of doing it. And it's one of my favourite examples of a completely disruptive thought process going into something that nobody even thought of challenging. And that... Brilliant. That is where the real step change and excitement and drama for entrepreneurs lies.
Damien, thank you. Where can people find out more about you?
Do you know what? If they want to email me, I'm always happy to chat to people. Damian, D-A-M-I-A-N, Damian at realvision.com. I love, as you can probably tell, talking about ideas. I love exploring new things. I love helping people. I'm very much a believer in good karma. You know, if we all help each other, everybody will benefit. There's no point hiding anything. So
completely agree.
Very happy for people to just email me directly.
Brilliant, thank you. And I rarely get to do this or say this, but it was a truly inspirational, mind-bending session. So thank you very much indeed.